Welcome back. Turning now to a busy day on Capitol Hill. On the Senate side, Republicans are already scrambling to see who's going to be next in line after Senator Mitch McConnell, said he plans to step down as Senate Republican leader later this year. Texas Senator John Cornyn announced his candidacy this morning, and he could face competition from several of his colleagues. Meanwhile, the House passed a short-term government funding bill that will extend deadlines to March 8th and March 22nd. More Democrats, though, than Republicans voted for its passage. The Senate is expected to take up the measure soon. And the Senate recently passed a separate package to send aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. But House Speaker Johnson says the House is still considering its options and that his top priority is not foreign aid.
The House is actively considering options on a path forward, but our first responsibility is to fund the government. And our primary overriding responsibility has been for the last 3 years is to secure the border.
Joining me now is Oklahoma Republican Congressman Tom Cole. Thank you so much for being here. He is, of course, the Vice President and Chair of the House Appropriations Committee and Chair of the House Rules Committee. Now, Congressman, more Democrats than Republicans voted on passing this short-term CR. Do Republicans really have a functioning majority in the House right now, given that Democrats had to help fund the government?
No, well, look, I do think we have a functioning majority in the House, but a substantial majority of Republicans actually did vote for the continuing resolution. But approach bills always are bipartisan. They're very seldom are passed along partisan lines, and this CR certainly is an example of that.
But the continuing resolution was passed under suspension, and the last bill signed into law that didn't pass by suspension or by unanimous vote was the bill to avert a debt default last May. That's 9 months ago. Really, all major legislation is passing by rules committees and are not in regular order. So I have to ask you, is the U.S. House broken?
No, not at all. Frankly, we're passing bipartisan bills, which is, I thought, what people want us to do. Look, you have a Republican House, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic President. So the idea that any bills are going to get through along strictly partisan lines is probably, not a very good assumption. At some point, they'll mutate into bipartisan bills. Earlier this year, we passed, partisan NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act numbers of, partisan bills on the appropriations. Actually got many more appropriations bills across the line than the Democratic Senate did. So,
but Congressman, this is not happening in regular order.
Look, of course it is regular order. You don't always have to have a rule. On these bills, we're going to have a bipartisan majority, no question about that. But there was a substantial majority of both parties that voted for the continuing resolution.
Well, I want to now turn to the border, Congressman. President Biden, of course, is there, and he criticized congressional Republicans for blocking, he said, bipartisan border legislation. He says Congress needs to act, that this can't just be executive action. What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, he needs to reverse all the bad decisions he's made for the last 3 years. Second, if he'd like to have legislation, the House sent in May of last year border security bill to the Senate. There's not even been a hearing on that. So, look, this is a problem the president created by really bad judgment, ending the Remain in Mexico law, ending catch and release, stopping construction of a border wall. I think the American people know pretty clearly who's responsible for the disaster of the border. The president ought to act in good faith and reverse those bad decisions right now. That'd be the real contribution. Second, if the Senate wants to get serious, they should actually bring up a bill that the House sent them in May. They haven't been able to produce anything themselves. So to say, it collapsed because it couldn't get out of the Senate. That's the Senate's problem, not the House's problem.
But I have to say, you mentioned Remain in Mexico. Mexico says it's not going to cooperate with that policy and that there are going to be people with credible asylum cases.
When did we let the Mexicans decide who can and cannot come across our borders any more than we decide who can and can't come across theirs? I don't care if they cooperate or not. The president has the power to shut the border now.
But
he created these problems himself, and he can just start by reversing the executive actions that he followed from day one.
But again, the president is saying that Congress needs to act. So I wonder, could you say what's the best policy? What's the best way forward here?
Well, the best way forward would be to pass H.R. 2, which the Democratic Senate has failed to even bring up and have a committee hearing on. They don't have to pass our bill. They need to bring it up, make whatever changes they want. We can go through the process. Second, the president undid a system that was working. He did it deliberately, systematically. And if he had the power to undo those executive orders from the Trump administration, he has the power to reinstate them. That would actually be a sign of good faith. You know, right now we look on this more as an administration that's flailing and trying to find political cover, not as an administration that has ever cared since its inception about security at the border. These are the president's actions that caused it. He ought to start reversing them. He ought to bring up the ask the Democratic Senate to bring up the Republican border security bill, and I think we'd be well on our way to solutions.
As Speaker Johnson has said, he's not wedded to H.R. 2. Are there other bills you think or know of that he is considering?
No, I do not. I think there are sections of the bill that we could probably pass. You might not have to have it all. I think if you just pass the Remain in Mexico portion, we've been advised by Border Patrol that would probably solve 50, 60, 70% of the problem. So there are measures, again, and these are things that the president undid himself that were working. I don't think he, called down to the president of Mexico and said, what do you think about undoing Remain in Mexico? He just did it. So now he needs to undo it, and the Democratic Senate needs to take, if they can't pass anything of their own, needs to take up a bill that we have, change it in whatever way they want, and send it over here, and we'll work on things together. But again, when we pass a bill 4 months after we're the majority, that passed in May of last year, they don't do anything on it. When we have a president that consistently issues executive orders that undermine the system that was working and now tries to blame this on us, I mean, that dog won't hunt. So I think it's a political desperation by the administration, and I think the American people will see it for what it is and vote accordingly in the fall.
Congressman, I want to move on to another topic. Hunter Biden, he testified behind closed doors yesterday. We didn't hear any news about new evidence that President Biden used his elected office to enrich his son. Should Hunter Biden still testify publicly?
I think that commitment's been made to Hunter Biden, and I think he ought to have that opportunity. He asked for that, and I think, again, if that's what he wants to do. Personally, I'm not on the Committee of Jurisdiction, so I didn't have an opportunity to hear what he had to say during his deposition. But, again, I don't see any problem with having a public hearing, particularly since he's requested one.
And with that, I mean, how will this impeachment inquiry, and I want to ask you, is it going to be a House floor? Is it going to be a report? What comes next, and how is it going to end?
Again, I really don't know. You'd need to talk to the Committee of Jurisdiction, which is both oversight and judiciary in this matter. I'm not on those committees. So, again, we'll see what evidence they have, and they'll make the decision. And we've certainly shown we're not afraid to vote on these things. We did on Mayorkas, and we'll see what happens here. But, right now, I wish I could give you a clear path forward. But, again, I'm not in a position to do that.
I want to also say some of your fellow committee chairs, Kathy McMorris, Rogers, and Mike Gallagher, they're retiring this cycle. Why do you think that is?
Well, you'd have to ask them their individual reasons. I mean, Kathy obviously has been here 20 years, long career. Hate to lose her. I think she's very much one of the best chairmen we have. And I think Mike Gallagher is a guy of just enormous promise, has done a great job on the Select Committee on China. So, but members come and go all the time. And frankly, you have a lot of members leaving on the Democratic side to run for higher office. I mean, what does that say? So again, the numbers aren't particularly unusual, but you always lose good people. But, you generally get good people when the election happens as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Congressman Tom Cole.
It's a privilege. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.